If you ever wondered why everything just seems to shift as soon as you hit 15% body fat and sometimes even lower, maybe you notice difference in your energy, your mindset, your mood. And I've been around 15% down to 10% body fat. And I'll say there's certain key differences and changes you're gonna notice as soon as you get to that 15% body fat mark. And some key differences you're gonna need to know for yourself. I'm gonna be breaking down exactly what happens when you reach that 15% body fat milestone that you always want to reach, and what happens when you push even further down body fat levels like 9 or 10%. And I'm gonna be breaking all that down in this video. Before we dive into what body fat 15% looks like and it feels like, we need to know how 15% body fat is generally classified in America. So particular organizations like the American Council of Exercise and National Institute of Health, these specific body fat percentages reflect their overall health like cardiovascular risk, chronic diseases, athletic performance, and mortality all in one. So this is basically just a breakdown on how the American Council of Exercise determines how healthy you are at your specific body fat and what other people compare it to. So generally around 2 to 5% body fat, you need fat for normal physiological functions, which include fat stored in organs, bone marrow, and muscles. They're just necessary for reproduction of life. We all know that we need fat essentially for testosterone, for estrogen, and also a key difference, men generally have lower body fat levels than women just because men tend to have more muscle mass on them or determine this specific body fat level, that going anywhere below this level can actually impair organ function and overall health. So you won't see these specific body fat percentages unless you're a competitive bodybuilder, mostly for them, if you're an elite athlete or maybe a marathon runner. So those are generally the people that you'll find that specific body fat level geared toward. Trying to maintain that body fat isn't the healthiest to maintain all year round. So a study titled Body Composition of Elite American Athletes, they reported that the average body fat percentage for certain male athletes, and they broke it down. So canoe and kayaking athletes were around 13% body fat plus or minus 2.5%. So they were in the range of 15.5% all the way down to 10.5% body fat. Swimming was 12.4 plus or minus 3.7% body fat. Boxing around 6.9% average. Wrestling around 7.9%. 100 meter and 200 meter sprinters were around 6.5% body fat. Marathon runners were around 6.4% body fat. But I've seen specific studies evaluated the lower limits of body fat, and they primarily used a DEXA scan, which is a little bit more favorable in terms of getting a more realistic body fat percentage just based on the technology they used. And it's usually classified as one of the highest standards in the fitness industry for measuring body fat. So the average body fat in this specific study for 454 male athletes was 18.2 plus or minus 4.9%. That was for basketball players specifically, had the lowest body fat percentage, which was at 15.3%. And according to ACE, the American Council of Exercise, they typically classify athletes that maintain a body fat percentage in the 6 to 13% range. And this kind of allows for a balance between having enough muscle and a low percentage of body fat so you could still maintain your performance. Now, if you're into fitness, and this is what we primarily want, the average for a fitness goer is between the 14 to 17% range. So this is just based on people who exercise regularly, but they're not professional athletes like majority of us are. So we have a healthy amount of fat and a good level of muscle definition, typically lower risk of cardiovascular disease, diabetes, hypertension, which gets a lot of people because health also plays a marker. And a lot of people like to go to the gym because they were told to go to the gym for their health benefits. But I feel like a lot of people just really go to the gym just to stay in shape and look good all year round. So this is just common for the general fitness industry or for strength training rather than just athletic performance. Now, the average body fat range is anywhere from 18% to 24%. So it's going to reflect a healthy balance between having a good amount of body fat and lean muscle mass. So that was just according to national health surveys and studies. A reduced risk of developing obesity-related diseases such as heart disease, type 2 diabetes, when compared to higher body fat percentages. But those in the higher range as well may have an increase of chronic health problems if they don't maintain an active, healthy lifestyle, which just seems logically right. And then if you're 25% and above, you're technically classified as obese by the National Institute of Health and by the WHO, so the World Health Organization. They use body fat percentage along with BMI to identify obesity, but BMI isn't perfect in itself either. So men typically with a body fat over 25% have a higher risk for metabolic diseases like type 2 diabetes, heart disease, hypertension, certain cancers. And then the ACE, like I said, defines as anybody that's over 25% body fat as obese. They usually typically have excess abdominal fat, which is going to be linked to risk of visceral fat related diseases. All right, so it's also important to understand between the research and the fat distribution on your body, particularly your abdominal region. So think about your visceral fat. It's going to be more closely linked to health risks than overall body fat. So a man with a body fat percentage of around 24%, but they have low abdominal fat, may have a lower risk than someone with 22%, but they have a lot of belly fat. Imagine you're in the gym and you spot an attractive guy or girl. Majority of the time, they're probably going to have a smaller belly, smaller waist, thicker thighs, thicker upper body. And we look at that, they're a healthy and fit individual versus the other way around. They have a big belly, big waist, smaller upper body, smaller legs. We're not going to look at them as being healthy and fit. In obese women, while abdominal fat and thigh subcutaneous fat were associated with lower mortality risks in normal and overweight women. So like I said, use that same idea and then apply it to the people you see around you. BMI stands for body mass index. Not always accurate for determining whether a person is overweight or obese, especially in muscular individuals. Those with higher bone density, body fat percentage offers a more accurate reflection of body composition, but to get your body fat levels, you're going to probably end up using stuff like the DEXA scan. The most accurate is technically the MRI, but it's too costly. You really have to be rich to really do that. But that doesn't mean there's not other indicators we can use to determine what percentage of body fat you're at. So going back to BMI, BMI doesn't account for muscle mass. It treats muscle mass and fat the same, which is why the BMI index scale isn't the most accurate. It doesn't really measure overall health. So technically a healthy BMI doesn't guarantee good overall health. It's just what people with normal BMIs can still be at risk for cardiovascular disease, high blood pressure, and diabetes. I have a lot of friends that still are at risk for some type of disease related to diabetes, heart disease, but they're still at a healthy body weight. Our target is 15%, and 15% for most Americans is amazing according to the standard, and even more reasons why everything changes once you get down to 15%. I don't even have to visually tell you, we could just see it. So if fitness is your goal, this is the perfect range for you. All right, so first thing, aesthetic changes, so how you visually look. So abs and muscles, the definition may not be as pronounced, so as seen. It's often considered a healthy and sustainable body fat percentage. I know for most of us, dipping below 15% body fat kind of sucks. You'll usually have visible muscle tone, so you'll still be able to see that muscle separation, versus if you were to go down to like, let's say 9 or 10% body fat, there's more significant, more muscle definition, especially in your abdominal region. The muscles are going to look more cut, more vascular. You're going to see more visible veins. You're going to start to see it more predominantly like in your arms, sometimes going down on your hand. I know a lot of people like to see that. I know a lot of women love to see that. Shoulders, your lower body. The physique at this particular body fat percentage is a little bit more lean and more defined. Let's talk about the health of 15% body fat versus lower. Usually around 15% is, like I said, sustainable for most people, and it can be maintained without overly restricting your diets or any type of intense exercise, like doing a lot of cardio, because I personally do a lot of cardio, especially when I'm dieting down. But even in the off season, I'll still end up doing like 3-4 cardio sessions, but that's just to maintain overall good cardiovascular health as well. If you were to get down to 9 or 10% body fat, it can be a little bit harder to maintain over the long term. You might experience some lower menstrual cycles in women, more intense training regimen, and some people are probably going to struggle with their energy, their mood, maybe their sleep. And as you get down, especially for health, being at a lower percent body fat, you're gonna often lead to a lot more stress. This can lead to muscle loss and sometimes interfere, like I said, with your sleep, overall health, well-being, if you sustain it for too long and your body doesn't wanna keep it for that long. So leptin is a hormone that actually regulates appetite and energy balance. And as your body fat decreases, this is the worst part. Your leptin levels are gonna drop. So it's gonna make you feel a lot more hungrier. It's gonna lead to increased cravings. So all those times you wake up in the middle of the night, because I know I do it, I know a lot of people do this. You wake up and you look in your fridge and you're looking for a quick and easy snack, but you can't do it because you've been restricting yourself so much. And that tends to get in the way too, because you're gonna do it more profoundly and you're gonna do it more often. Imagine when you start dipping down to 9, 10% body fat, you're gonna wake up frequently throughout the night just because you're so hungry. Generally, strength and performance, it's still gonna be pretty high because you're just gonna have a lot more stored fat as energy reserve. So that's gonna help you push through your performance in the gym, hit those PRs and bench the squat, especially for endurance activities or any type of heavy lifting. Your muscles are gonna generally look a lot fuller because you have more stored fuel in them. So a lot more carbohydrates, a lot more glycogen, more food, more carbohydrates, versus if you were to go to 9 to 10% body fat, your performance may start to dip a little bit because you don't have as much muscle glycogen, and your most preferred source of energy is carbohydrates during moderate to intense activity. So if you don't have that much, you're not going to perform as well. But for endurance specific based activities, it's actually going to probably improve because of the increase leanness and cardiovascular efficiency. So it's either you take a little bit of a dip in strength and then you increase your endurance, especially as you get leaner. And you'll notice that with your cardiovascular exercises, sometimes you might be able to hold a little bit longer week by week, and performance in the gym, you might not be as strong. The mental impact of being at a low percentage of body fat, we're talking 9 to 10% if that's your idea. Usually you're pretty hyper focused with your diet, your exercise. There's a lot less flexibility you have to maintain. You're constantly tracking your food intake, you're working out a lot, maintaining a lot of discipline, and sometimes it becomes just like mentally exhausting. As far as socially, there's often like a pressure to maintain that low percentage of body fat, which is probably gonna affect your social life as well. So like when you go out, you can't drink the same amount of alcohol you usually do. You're just gonna have to have a lot more self-conscious awareness of the food choices you make and the physical appearance. But on the flip side, if you're 15% body fat, you could still feel fit, you're healthy, you're a little bit more relaxed, won't overthink those occasional treats or when you go out once in a while with your friends or your family. For most people, without a drastic lifestyle change, but if you maintain 8 to 10%, let's say, that's often gonna require constant effort, making it difficult to sustain in the long term. And then as you dip down to 8 to 10% versus like a 15% body fat, sometimes it can result in a slowed down metabolism, especially if you're not careful with your nutrition. So the body could enter something called metabolic adaptation. So basically where it becomes efficient at using fewer calories throughout the day, making your fat loss even harder. So let's say you're very energetic throughout the day, and because of that, you burn an extra certain amount of calories, and now your body's compensating by sitting around all the time instead to save a little bit more energy. What about the potential risk of muscle loss when you're around 15% body fat? You're generally gonna have more muscle mass, and you're gonna be able to afford a lot more flexibility in your diet, in your training, versus like 9 to 10% body fat. Muscle loss becomes more of a real risk without proper protein intake, resistance training, and just being a little bit more restrictive. This is the this is the best part. This one actually gets me a lot. The psychological factors. When you're at 15% body fat, you're still gonna have your mental clarity, you're still gonna have the motivation you need to keep pushing yourself through, even though you really need a lot more discipline, because even those days where I don't wanna work out, it's the discipline that really gets me through the rest of my workout, because that's what I love to do, and it should be the same thing for you. Your motivation's still pretty high. People often still feel confident around this specific area, especially about their physique, without having a lot of extra effort or like obsession about pushing too hard or being too lean. Versus if you're going down to 9 or 10% body fat, sometimes it could have a more significant psychological impact on you. I know for me, when I get down leaner, it just sucks. Sometimes it really does suck because I can't sustain it for that long. So sometimes even after a few weeks, it becomes mentally draining. You're gonna probably experience more obsessive thoughts about food, training, maintaining the low percentage of body fat, and it could just take a toll on your overall lifestyle, your social interactions, making it hard to sustain mentally. You might not wanna go out as often as you do because now you see your friends maybe being a little bit more flexible with the way you eat, but you wanna keep the way you look because you love the way you look. So it's hard to kind of find that balance. Now that we understand the positive effects physically and mentally of 15% body fat, we know it's actually a really good mark to hit. For most Americans, especially looking to dive into fitness, how do we get there exactly? So there's 3 primarily key factors, and then there's also 3 of the biggest common mistakes I see when we want to get around to 15% body fat. And this is just on a regular basis between me coaching clients, and what I've seen with the general population. So you ever see those regulars that go to your gym often? They do the same workout every single year, nothing progresses, they look the same, they generally feel the same, and this is every single year, the same people. And you know why this is? It's because diet is 80 to 90% of how you're gonna look. You could train till you're blue in the face, but if your diet is not there, you're not gonna change the way you look. And you'll still look better if you were to just resistance training and eat like it doesn't work out like that. You need to find a balance, but your diet is gonna be really 80 to 90% of how you're gonna look. You're never gonna outwork your diet. So how do we fix this? First thing, the most important thing, we wanna be in a calorie deficit. Calorie deficit is important for losing fat because it forces your body to use the stored fat as energy. When you consume fewer calories than your body burns in a day, your body's gonna tap in those fat reserves that you have all over your belly, your arms, your stomach. It's gonna make up the difference. And then it's just gonna lead to fat loss over time. This is also a common misconception. We don't know exactly where it's gonna pull from. Each person is different, but as you keep getting leaner, whatever area you wanna get more lean and defined, it's gonna eventually pull it from somewhere. So if you have a lot of face fat and it's not pulling from your face, as you get leaner, it's gonna have to pull from somewhere. So it's gonna get to your face eventually. You could just multiply our body weight anywhere from 10 to 12. So if you weigh 200 pounds, anywhere from 2,000 to 2,200 would be your calorie deficit. Or you could just use the Harris-Benedict equation and then minus anywhere from 10 to 25% off your calorie maintenance. maintenance. So if your calorie maintenance, after you plug in all your numbers in the Harris-Benedict equation, is around 2,000 calories, minus anywhere from 10 to 25% for your calorie deficit. Start from there for a few weeks and see how your body fluctuates. And then we're gonna make sure we're tracking everything correctly. So we're gonna use apps like MyFitnessPal, Macro Factor, use those specific apps to make sure we weigh in our food, we track it accurately, because that's gonna be the best way we're gonna know awareness-wise of how much we're eating. Number two, we're gonna eat enough protein throughout the day and in our meals. So protein is crucial in a calorie deficit because it's gonna help preserve the muscle mass. It's gonna promote the fullness and reduce your hunger. The whole point of fat loss and dieting is to preserve as much muscle as we can while primarily just losing body fat. But we're also gonna lose water, we're gonna lose minerals. Like I said, we're still gonna lose some muscle mass, but the whole point is maintain as much muscle mass as we can while we diet down. And that's where I think a lot of people get confused. We're not dieting just to lose fat. We're dieting really to preserve as much muscle as we can while primarily losing body fat. And then for those people whose goal of getting leaner and gaining muscle, the guideline is anywhere from 0.7 grams to 1 gram per pound of body mass is a suitable start. If you weigh 200 pounds, anywhere from 140 grams to 200 grams per day of protein. And then you use that and track that in your MyFitnessPal. Number three, we're gonna incorporate resistance training and cardio. Resistance training is also gonna help preserve the muscle mass while we're losing body fat. Without it, you're just gonna risk losing more muscle along with the fat as well, which can possibly slow down your metabolism. And then the primary goal of resistance training, it's gonna help increase your muscle protein synthesis to help you preserve all that muscle mass that you work so hard for. And that's not what we wanna lose. The cardio is included as well because the cardio is gonna increase calorie burn. It's gonna help you create a larger calorie deficit, especially if you don't wanna keep dropping your calories so much. This is the best way you're gonna do it. If you're always hungry, when you start dieting down, you hit a certain amount of calories and you don't wanna drop any further, cardio is gonna be your next best friend. And it's just gonna make it easier for you to maintain a healthy weight, just maintain a healthy cardiovascular system as well. Resistance train anywhere from 2 to 4 days a week. That's the perfect way to do it. Minimum with weights, do some calisthenics. And then cardio is gonna be after the weight training because we want our full attention on the weight training on a separate day, or if you do it the same day, just keep it a few hours apart. So your performance for cardio doesn't affect your performance for resistance training. You combine all these, see how your sleep is, your hunger, your stress, your anxiety, overall blood markers of health. And if everything's kind of in the right direction, everything is improving, or you see the benefits, then you're doing something right. So let's do the 3 biggest mistakes I often see people do while trying to lose body fat and get to that 15% milestone. Number 1, they're not tracking calories. Many people underestimate how much they're eating or just don't track their food intake at all. And it's just gonna lead you to consume more calories than you unknowingly are eating, and it's gonna slow down your weight loss, your fat loss. So the best ways to track your calories is you're gonna weigh everything raw. So you're gonna get a food scale, you're gonna weigh the chicken raw, you're gonna weigh the beef raw, you're gonna weigh the rice raw, the potatoes raw, and then whatever number that's on that food scale, you're gonna put that into MyFitnessPal. One of the biggest mistakes I made was not weighing out my food before and weighed it out after I cooked it. Heat and water are gonna affect the composition of food. If you put chicken in a pan, the water is gonna evaporate, it's gonna weigh less. Same thing for a lot of foods. Always, if you want the most accurate depiction of how many calories you're eating, you need to weigh it raw before you cook it, before you do anything to it. Biggest mistake, number 2, you're relying on too much cardio. If you focus on only cardio, probably gonna lead to muscle loss as well, which can possibly lower your metabolism. That is why we focus on a combination of cardio and resistance training. It's just more effective for fat loss and for maintaining muscle. You're gonna look better overall, and you're not gonna be at risk for losing as much muscle if you were to just do the cardio. And then mistake number 3, going back to tracking. So like I said, not tracking your protein intake. If you fail to track your protein intake, I'm telling you right now, it's gonna hinder your muscle preservation during that fat loss period. Without enough protein, you risk losing muscle mass along with the fat you're losing as well. It's gonna slow down your progress. You're gonna look skinny fat, so you're just gonna look smaller than you were. Nobody's gonna give you compliments. If anything, everyone's gonna ask you, what's wrong with you? Are you sick? Why are you not feeling well? Meanwhile, you're doing everything underneath the sun to get the best body you want, but you don't look it. Make sure you track your protein. The leaner you become, especially from where you started, the harder it's gonna become, especially depending on how long you've been dieting. But 15% body fat is a great body fat, as we just seen. If your main priority is fitness and health, is a perfect start or a perfect end. But there's one thing I forgot to tell you guys. If you wanna know the most effective way to lose body fat in 2025, it's right up here. I'll see you in the next one.